10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry and I'm a human-centered service design practitioner based in the wonderful city of Dublin, Ireland. Now, today on the show, we have got a very special guest, and that is Dr. Munib Karavdic from Wave Design in Sydney. Now, I met Munib maybe about 10 years ago, when Munib was working for a really large organization in Australia, and there was an opportunity there, and unfortunately we didn't get to work together at that time. But what we do now we have a decade of stuff to catch up on. And Munib has been really busy because after he left that big organization, he's gone on to form Wave Design. Now, Wave Design is a design-led organization with lots of really interesting people working there. So it's a multidisciplinary kind of team, if you want, and Munib is leading that team. Now, what I really speak about in this episode is I want to peek behind the curtain a little bit and understanding Munib's background and how he sees design evolving over the next decade. So this isn't somebody who's just, dabbled here or there. Munib has given his life to design, He has a proven track record of success, and he has methods there as well that were new to me, and I wanted to learn more about them. And we share those, we discuss those openly in this episode. So if you are in this world of change making, or if you're in this world of service design or user experience, this is an episode that I believe will serve you well to listen to it. So Munib is fantastic, and I know you're going to love it. So let's jump straight in.
Munib, I'm delighted to have you on the podcast. Long time admirer, and as we were talking about there before we actually had a coffee in Sydney, it must be close to 9 or 10 years maybe since we actually sat down for that coffee. But maybe for our listeners who aren't familiar with your work, maybe start off, tell them a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do.
Well, it was lovely to be in your program, Gerry, and I must say that I really appreciate the contribution that you are making to the design world with this program. And I think it's very good to hear many opinions, many experiences, and many views that people can learn how to make stronger design community in any country. And it's very good actually that you do that globally. I really love that.
Oh, thanks very much. It means a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Well done for doing that. I really appreciate it. I'm pretty sure a lot of people appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me to have a chat with you about some experience.
It's all good.
As for me,
Wave Design.
Wave Design. So yeah, look, I think Wave Design is a design and innovation company in Australia, which is focusing pretty much actually helping businesses to design new programs, and doesn't necessarily need to be innovation all the time. So there are some things that people feel pain points, feel some bad experience, or a product is not functioning well. We're trying to help them, and that is our role. And on top of that, we also believe that to be successful in companies, and especially innovation and design program, we need to elevate mindset of people who are surrounding those projects. And in order to do that, you need to build that picture, and you need to include people, involve them in this in some way, train them to do stuff. And we have this approach where we work with subject matter experts. Our kind of philosophy is that we need to work with people within the organization, and then when we finish our work, they can continue doing work. Otherwise, if we don't have people who will continue the work, well, most of the projects will end up in some drawers or in the bin and things like that. So this is what we actually focus on, and then we see the outcomes. And our clients are saying that the biggest value that we provide is that we actually give confidence to their people, because their people are actually talking about design and outcomes, not my people, not our wave design people. So we this is what we help them building these capabilities as well. So we have a program that what we call this learn by doing program, where people experience that firsthand, how to deliver small solutions for the organization and solve some smaller problem within the organization, while they learn how to apply human-centered design methods and tools. So this kind of mix of everything.
Yeah, you've got a great mix. As we've already discovered, we could speak for hours, and you did warn me in an email saying, "Oh, I don't think an hour is going to be enough, because when me and you start talking, it's going to go on for a little bit." But I remember speaking to you and walking away, kind of saying, "You were very wise." That's one thing that came out of my mind. I can hear that again from just speaking to you for the last 40 minutes or so. But the bit that struck me was the deep interest in within the ecosystems of organization to foster entrepreneurship. Okay, that came through in the conversations we had almost 10 years ago. And what I'm really interested in is why that is interesting to you as a practitioner.
So I think when you are kind of an entrepreneur, so you have one man. It can be one band, or you can have a few people around you making decisions, and you are in love with your kind of solutions that you have in mind, or your idea that you have in mind, and then you struggle how to scale this. But on the other side, you have all of these aspects what startups don't have. Like, you have an environment already set up, systems, infrastructure, market awareness. And then the question is how you navigate that. And the challenge here is, as we progress with our careers and companies is growing, we actually make our internal knowledge stronger and stronger, while understanding outside world is getting weaker and weaker. And that's what we call this kind of what to build gap. And the point here is we kind of starting forcing things that we believe it's right. And even if we say, look, let's talk to customers, we don't need to, because our people are our customers, let's talk to them. But they are not the same. We know that.
Yeah.
And kind of, I actually found very interesting and challenging navigating that, because we have a different character. We have different behaviors. We have a different leadership styles. And then you need to study people, how they're reacting on some things. And then when based on that understanding of people, you create some certain kind of approach that will actually win people over and start actually following what you've been doing. And the biggest kind of the biggest prize for an entrepreneur is that you can see people are driving that without you being there.
Yeah, that's
kind of very interesting, actually.
Success.
Very interesting. Then this term intrapreneurship was actually strengthened by Steve Jobs. When he was fired from Apple, and then he established Pixar Studio, and he came back to Apple, and he admitted it and saying, "Hey, I've been kind of constantly an entrepreneur, and I didn't adapt to the situation that I was running big company, which is a global company, and I was still acting like an entrepreneur." And that's his real challenge for people who are kind of scaling up startups. And then he realized that he needs to now navigate stakeholders. He needs to navigate people. He needs to kind of inspire people to follow him. There was much different kind of set of skills and capabilities that people should acquire in order to drive the innovation in large organizations. It's not like, I'm excellent in this, and therefore I will drive that in proper way.
So entrepreneurship, when we look at it from every organization, do you believe, is it something that they should encourage, or is it just certain organizations will be better suited to it?
Absolutely encouraged, and then see, in my view, that's the way for growth. Yeah. So they're becoming entrepreneurs, and even people who are just trying to do stuff is
Yeah.
actually very helpful, even if it's mistake, if it's error and things like that. But actually, to get into entrepreneurship, it's not just good enough that you have some enthusiastic people driving that. It needs
Sure.
to be an entire strategy behind it. And then the strategy means how much we are aligned with our overall strategy. And then we don't want actually people to go to reinvent kind of space shuttle while we are working on some insurance product. So we want actually people to be aligned with our mission, where we want to go. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we need to understand what are the frameworks that we work together. What are the methods and tools that we use? What is our commitment in terms of funding? How we approve this kind of these projects? There are a set of activities that we need to have in place before we jump with the hackathons, with the brainstorming sessions and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then I walk into organization, and people would say, "Hey, we have thousands of ideas. We don't know what to do with them." Of course you
Yeah.
don't, because you don't have a process,
They're not
and
mature
then
enough.
you don't have a situation when you get an idea of what happened after that idea.
Yeah. It's like I was speaking to Ofer Yomtov on the podcast. If you haven't listened to that episode, folks, it's available. Well worth a listen. But we spoke about designers or change makers that are in the organizations at the moment, and they don't feel that they're making their mark. They don't feel like the dial is moving, and they're banging their heads against the wall, and they want to try something. They want to try and encourage, growth of the maturity of the organization. His advice was, if you don't get the leadership buy in, go somewhere that does value it. Okay, go somewhere that really makes you feel like you're actually making a difference. But if you can't leave, okay, this is the question I wish I asked Ofer. But if you can't leave those scenarios, okay, because I know some people are tied down, they got mortgages, they've got situations where maybe there's visas, whatever it is, and they want to try and demonstrate the value. They want to try and encourage leadership to take notice. What are the most common blockers that they face, do you see? And how do you get around them?
Well, the number one is actually kind of mindset, as I mentioned earlier. Because we train leaders in some
Yeah.
certain way how to lead the organization. And when you come with some kind of new concept, a new kind of way of thinking for them, so it's not new here, well, where we all kind of designers are familiar with this, and then they would walk in and comfortable saying, this is how we rule the world. But actually, when you start talking, and then if people are not comfortable, a lot of them would not admit and say, well, I don't understand this. They would just push back.
Yeah.
So, and then the best way to do that is to find the way how you make it closer to those people.
Yeah.
And then as simple as, like, inviting leaders to get into the interviewing process when you go to do the research, for example. And it's kind of, when you structure that in the way, when the leaders go and observe what happened, then they were really shocked what they heard, because they usually live in some isolated world, and they don't have a lot of interaction with end users. And then when they hear this first kind of hand, they start actually moving. But there are a lot of tricks they can do. When I was at AMP, which is, for your listener, which is the largest at that time, was largest life insurance company and superannuation provider in Australia. So I actually, because my CEO kind of was traveling around the world every 6 months, because meeting shareholders
God,
around
that's an
the
awful
world.
job.
And then what I did actually, whenever I figure out that cities that he's going, and I was looking my connections in these cities, and then people who are doing design and innovation, and or companies who did it in design innovation, and I start connecting them. And he was actually meeting with these people and getting some information, and he would come back to Australia, and he would talk stories what he heard from these people. So it's kind of, when I teach entrepreneurship, and I put it as a bell curve, like, and in the organization, and on the right hand side you have a knowledge kind of experts in design innovation. Then you have a champions who are following those knowledge and experts.
Mm.
Then you have a people who are what I called it fence sitters, and they were not sure will they actually go with the kind of champions, or they will go. And the last group is naysayers. And then you have a lot of these naysayers at the beginning. So, and then the job of anybody in designer or mainly head of design is actually to make sure that first you actually move these fence sitters into the camp of champions. And then the naysayers will start actually going and become kind of fence sitters, and they will start actually following. So kind of when we started doing this, I remember we did the first kind of ethnographic research about some insurance product, new product, and then we organized session on insights, what we learned from these sessions. And I organized kind of what I call the town hall session in the organization, and we had a room of 300 people can sit there, and we had 7 or 8 people who were presenting, and actually only for first session only 4 people turned up.
What?
And then my guys were asking me, saying, well, look at this, there's many more people than actually who are presenting than people who are in audience. And what we are going to do, I said, we present. Even 4 people, we present. And then when we present to these 4 people, the next session, we had probably 20. To cut long story short, after several iterations, when we weren't actually going around the organization and presenting, we had people couldn't fit in the room. That's how people become interested in this. And that's what I'm saying. You have these naysayers converting in some way that they will kind of fence sitters, and then you can get people with you. And then it was kind of the biggest outcome for me would be after the session when people came to me and said, I now understand what actually customer-centric organization means. And that's what you want to hear.
Aligning on the definition is one of the things, like what is it we mean by what we're talking about? Because one of the things that I kind of curse the English language for is design is interpreted into many different things. And aligning on the fact that it's not just about making it look good or, having a nice big shiny logo that animates, into something that's actually really functional and delivers for both the business and the person using the product or service. That's a big thing for an organization to get through. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more around, because in the research for this, I know you developed a tool that you did when you were at AMP, and I'd heard about it. I think you mentioned this to me when we had coffee. So it's been around for, I don't know, a while. I think you call it Assess, which is a great name for a tool. But tell me how it came about, and tell us a little bit more around how it works and operates and what value it can bring to an organization.
Look, before I start doing it, I have to give a credit to my friends from Luma Institute, and especially a guy who was the CEO, Chris Paccioni, who was, he and I really partnered well, even if he was on the other part of the continent in the US, in Pittsburgh, I was in Sydney, but we really kind of worked well in kind of bringing this kind of corporate design into kind of very established organization that have a very traditional way of delivering things. So, and then his team was spending some time doing some research, and we captured some articles from Sloan Management Review and Harvard Business Review and some others, some mix of theoretical and managerial articles. And then there are a lot of these cultural assessment of innovation and things like that. And we started they built the first cut, and I continue building that at AMP. And what we did, because we introduced this kind of training called HCD Practitioner Program, and we wanted actually people to go through this program, and we kind of managed to train around 1,500 people.
Wow,
really
nice.
Huge. And then not actually by the leaders selecting people, then we actually had a website where people can nominate themselves to go into this program. And then if they have a approval from leaders, they will come in and we will go through this. And then what happened actually when we did this, we were trying to assess the leadership, how people see that. And before we started with the training, we asked people to fill in a survey and tell us their own perception of what is design innovation at AMP. And we were surprised that we got a very high score for many aspects, which I personally, being there, knew that it probably is not realistic. But anyway,
Mm.
so that was the perception. And what we usually say, people's perception is our reality. But when people went through the course and program of what we designed for them, and we actually asked them again 6 months later to do the same thing, results were much lower. And then when we investigated with people saying, well, what happened here? They said, well, we actually thought that's the kind of what we have. But when we actually understood what is that we needed to have, we've realized that it is not actually up to the scale.
Yeah.
But then we started actually building that across the organization. And that was kind of, and then what I did, I worked on that more and modified with my team at Wave Design. We further consult literature. And then I was starting building this entrepreneurship course at university. And for that purposes, we build this, what we call it Wave Assess. And what
Yeah.
we do with that kind of program, we don't actually, it's kind of free. People can go to our website and take this Wave Assess kind of survey, which is very good actually, in the way that when you finish the survey, when you go through the process and assess yourself, you will get an email immediately saying, this is what the kind of our assessment or system is actually positioning your level of progress in innovation and design in your organization. So, which is very cool. But what we do, we usually, when we go and talk to people, we go into to spend a little time with the in-depth interviews of leaders. And then we ask the same leaders to go through this questionnaire, and we look at that from two aspects, like what people told us and what people think through the survey. And what actually, to our surprise, we found that very often they are different. And what we learn from people deeper, and then they're kind of processing things is different from their assessment. And there is tendency that people would probably paint better picture when they go through the survey, as opposed to when we talk to them in detail. And it could be also clarifying some terms, because this assess tool is actually, in some ways, could be technical and people don't understand that.
So let me understand that a little bit more. Is that a case of what the belief systems that the leaders have versus their actual reality of the skills that they have at hand? Is that a defensive measure, do you think? Or what's causing that? Like, where's that disconnect? Is that just a human condition?
It's human nature.
Human condition.
It's human nature. And then people have a tendency to, when you go through self-assessment, people have a tendency to be biased, and which is human nature that we are biased towards ourselves. But when you talk about these things, and that's the value of going in deeper discussions with the leaders, and then you can hear a lot of stories, and you can hear, especially like confidential discussions, like because we never actually present this, as you can understand, we never present it as individuals' views. We always look at it in an aggregate way. But it was quite interesting, actually. Some leaders, when we come with the aggregate views with insights, then some leaders say, "I would like to know who said that." No, we can't, because it's kind of our own kind of interpretation of what we heard. But I think it's kind of very good exercise, and then we call that alignment, and it's kind of critically important because very often, and when I talk about this, very often people left the meeting thinking we know who is doing what. And a week later, we came back to a meeting and we realized that people interpreted what we concluded in the meeting in different ways. And this is where disconnect started. And then coming back to your question, what was my motivation to drive this entrepreneurship? But this is exactly that. So you need to, you just imagine you have a symphony orchestra. And then if violin is having another tune, and then kind of piano has another tune, nobody will listen there. So the question is how you actually get your organization to act like a symphony orchestra.
On that point, I remember trying an exercise out years ago, and I don't know who told me about it. It's not something that I came up with. But on that point of you're running these meetings, and what did we agree on? You spend 5 minutes with a post-it to write down what did we agree on a post-it, and then you put them up on the wall, and you see that there's a disconnect across the room, and you kind of go, how has this happened? We've all agreed, and we've all agreed on different things. So those kind of exercises of visualization, of creating an alignment, is something that's quite powerful. Do you have any understanding about other things that you can include to help with those alignment pieces? Because the alignment piece is a huge opportunity for people who are in those situations, as I've addressed, that they can't move the dial. Journey mapping, visualization, creating boundary objects, they're all great. But for the design maturity, I think the alignment is one of the most important places to start.
Yeah. So I think there are obviously many approaches how
Yeah.
to do that stuff. But I think one of the methods we use is very much about problem framing. And we apply, we actually go into kind of explaining the context of problem framing.
Yeah.
Like, why do you need to frame the problem? And
Yeah.
one of the biggest kind of outcome of problem framing is to get alignment. Because once you get with one problem starter or statement starter, means that everybody should be on that page. And then on top of that, we don't insist that we spend hundreds of days of going around, and the tendency could be in corporate world, people will have endless discussion, what's the problem? But we don't actually put on that. And what we're saying, let's actually focus on one statement starter and then talk to people who experience that problem and then see if we are right. And I can tell you 90% of cases we probably
doesn't happen.
Framing the problem.
And I used to think in my naivety, it was just like people being obnoxious and kind of going, I'm going to do my own thing. I think it's an unintended situation that people, they assume the right thing. They assume we've all agreed, okay, we're all nodding. They're all nodding. That's an acceptance. But until we get to that point of saying, okay, this is what we're talking about. This is what we've agreed on. And that's, I know Adam Lawrence and Marcus Hormez, who I've worked with for years, that whole prototyping thing of getting something in the hands that we've co-created together and saying, okay, this is what we're talking about, is very, very powerful.
Yeah. And there is another trick that I used. Sometimes you have a tough people and they would say, leaders, and they would say, well, I know what the problem is. Or I have a solution. I'm not focused on problem. Yeah. And then what I usually do in this situation, I would say, okay, fine. So we can see that we can't move on some other stuff. So how about I kind of put my visual designer, and then the visual designer will actually visually present what you say that solution is.
Fantastic.
And if visual designer can actually draw the picture of your solution, means that we can take this and then we can go and put some sort of very kind of low fidelity prototype and then go and test it. Yeah. And then it was good hook. And they said, okay, I got it. And I like the idea. And then when they start actually interpreting what the solution is, and designers saying, where would I go with this one? And I said, not sure. And then what would I do?
You figure it out. You're the designer.
Yeah. And then people would say, oh, I got it now. Let's go back to drawing boards. And then let's actually go to the problem framing and things like that. So sometimes, there was a lot of, put it this way. When I was actually embedding this design innovation function in corporate world in Australia, I spent a lot of time in the US learning from people who already done it. And one of the people that they've done it really well was Procter and Gamble. And I had a lot of discussions and the time with Claudia Kochka. In that she was appointed by A.G. Luffley, who was CEO of Procter and Gamble at the time, at probably 2001, 2002. And her message was, so your role as design leader is actually to make sure that you clear the way and that people understand in the organization, they understand the value of design. And then you put designers in and you try to protect them from, because there are a lot of kind of unknown things for designers and for people who are dealing with them. And there's not a kind of intentional tension. Yeah. It is tension because misunderstanding. And that was and I actually put myself into that. I was really kind of thankful for this guidance she gave me. So these things like, and I just, my kind of mission was strategically to think, how can I onboard the organization with it? And then create a channel for designers to walk in. It's not like, oh, let's actually stop. I got the money, I will establish a design team, and that's it. We're done. No. So there's massive work in actually kind of going through the broad organization. And very often what I found when I go into companies now, I found that actually that a lot of design teams are just doing design for themselves. And then when I ask questions, so how much you have been engaging with the business, they say, but they don't want to talk to us. And it's not the way you want actually. First, designers, they don't like that environment, but the companies are thinking, well, design is not giving me any benefit.
Yeah.
But it is not actually a kind of holistic view how you position design in the organization.
One of the pieces that I really liked there was the framing piece from leadership, when they get to that point of saying, okay, we're going to establish the function of design. That typically means, and a big broad brush here of generalization happening, that they're going to install a team of designers into the organization. So that's option one. The other one that we're kind of talking about on this podcast, and also with what you're doing as well, Wave Design, is kind of developing the culture of entrepreneurship within organizations, which kind of means we don't want to be creating another silo within an organization of more designers, and within that you've got UXers and researchers and service designers, and you get all into these kind of compartments and within organization. How do you explain to executives and leaders that it's option two that we need to be fostering, and not option one of just building a team and having the head of design and making them do pretty pictures? Because that kind of reinforces that stereotype of design is here to make things pretty.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. And
thanks very much. Thank you.
But this is kind of vital question. So
very one. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, because I've been in kind of corporate world for many years, and then I was navigating this kind of function, and then I was sitting in in the investment committees, approving business cases, and I was actually chairing the investment committee for one of the retail banks, because I was head of strategy and growth strategy and things like that.
Yeah.
So what I found actually, when we call this, when we actually have a business case, and this is how I explain to leaders, when we have a business case, we approve that. And interestingly enough, you will not get a business case in front of the investment committee without a certain number, that are hitting numbers, like, return on investment 15%, break even after 1 or 2 years. Then you have all of these kind of ingredients, is tick market share growing, this and that. But what happened actually, we have a lot of unvalidated assumptions, and we actually put a lot of faith into these assumptions, believing that they will deliver outcomes. And we actually take leap of faith that people will deliver these outcomes. And we know that things are not working in that way. So as soon as you start hitting this kind of implementation, you start actually think, oh my goodness, we don't know this, we haven't done this, and things like that. And there is a kind of nice quote from, people are using this quote from Guy Kawasaki, saying, ideas are easy, the implementation is hard. And then my view is implementation is hard because we treat ideas easy. We need to spend much more time and energy actually fleshing out these ideas. And this is coming to the concept, what we call it leaps of logic. And this is where design comes in place. Leaps of logic means we are creating small leaps. And when we get we validate assumptions, we go next leap, we validate assumptions, next leap. As we progressing that, we validating many assumptions to the point where after several prototype testing, a minimum viable product, you get a very high level of confidence that these assumptions are proven, and you walk in very strong and saying, now I can tell you, we know that there is a desirability here. There is absolutely feasibility, and there's so much would cost, and viability is there as well. So, and I love, when I talk about this, I love kind of talking to chief risk officers, because chief risk officers are very important kind of aspect in decision-making process. Because if there is something unknown, people will immediately interpret it, oh, it's too risky. And then as soon as they interpret it's too risky, then better kind of kind of push back and then don't do that. So with this one, what we are saying, we are with a human-centered design, we are de-risking funding, because we had a much higher confidence what we are going to build. We had one client which was a global pharma company, and we helped them to actually create new events management system. They have a lot of interaction with medical practitioners here in Australia. And then we went through these leaps of logic, and then we end up kind of everything there. And then he called me after the investment committee meeting, and he said, I never experienced in my career that we approved a business case in 15 minutes. Because it was so clear, then we had a clear assumptions, all assumptions were tested. We have a very clear requirements defined based on these tested assumptions. We are going into production. And that's kind of the value of human-centered design, when you're unpacking that to the level that, for example, you start with problem framing. This is one leap. And then you probably don't agree with this, but then you go in next leap, which is actually going to talk to people who are experiencing that problem. And you go next leap, like, you're creating insights. In next leap, you go to talk to ideation and then frame the ideas. You go next one, test this idea. And many, many things there that you get much more confident. And then usually I got a question and say, well, it sounds like a long process. And it is at the beginning, like, it's not long, but it can go fast if we have a support from the organization. But every time you go this, you're actually going shorter and shorter. And for example, one of my KPIs when I was in corporate world was what's the time frame that we come with the prototype and minimum viable product. And then you see here, for example, when we started, it took us 6 months to get a minimum viable product. And as we practice this more, we ended up like having 3 or 4 months. And then people have a prototype, like prototypes were everywhere. How many prototypes you have? It's not a question how many ideas you have. The question was how many prototypes you have, how many of them you tested. And you walk in investment committee with the prototype in your hand, even if it's kind of a paper prototype, but people can understand what is that and what you tested and what are the assumptions that you tested.
Yeah, it's the bit that kind of I'm hanging on a little bit more is this idea factory piece that organizations tend to gravitate towards. When you're speaking, I get it. I'm on the same page. But when organizations tend to adopt this, they kind of think of it as, okay, the winning idea is going to come out of this. And I'm of the mindset that ideas can slow things down. Fix the service first. Fix things, make it functional, make it meet the needs. Because if you don't do that, you're adding ideas to the processes. It takes them away, detracts from the actual functionality of the core service. What are your thoughts on this? And is that something that you can actually speak more about? Because I know ideas are great, validating them, de-risking them, getting them, kind of funded, getting another business model for them to be iterated on and so forth. But what does it look like in terms of making that the core service is functional first?
Well, put it this way, we jumping too quickly into ideas. Okay. So companies are like, they just, well, put it this way. So I would just continue with the story about investment and leap of faith. So we hit the wall. We can't do this stuff, or even if we do this, it's not working. And we delivered it on time and budget, but we didn't actually move the dial. And then this is what I call this a nice landing, wrong airport. So we really delivered it.
That. I'm going to nick that one. That's going straight into a deck.
So, we are proud of what we delivered, but we actually not moving dial. And then what do we do in that situation? We say, let's actually brainstorm to see how we can resolve that situation. And then we actually brainstorm, and potentially we exaggerate the problem, because we actually, most likely we were focusing on wrong problem. And then what is actually important to start with is actually from the problem. It's not a service could be a problem, product could be a problem, experience could be a problem. Whatever problem you have, and you feel that there's the problem, this is where you start. And then if you want to go in ideation, you need to be very well informed, because and then people need to be they need people need to get learnings from that particular problem, and they need to
Sure.
be inspired. This is kind of massive exercise to
Yeah.
if you want to detach people from their current situation and gather ideas. So if you're thinking like, okay, let's have a 2 hours workshop, and hey guys, come here, let's do ideation. Do you think that people will be able to actually detach
No.
themselves from their current situation? There is no way. What we need to do, and we spend a lot of time warming up people, and you spend a lot of time stimulating, giving examples. And there is we call this 6-path analysis, blue ocean model. I really love this 6-path. Like, look at the kind of from outside your industry. Look at the strategic positioning. Look at the history. And then all of these things, you go in there and start actually getting examples, and people start immersing themselves. And you suddenly say, hey, this is our problem. Let's actually talk about it. And then you suddenly started getting a lot of interesting conclusions and inspiring ideas based on that. So, and that's the kind of people don't understand. Like, I just collect the ideas. It doesn't work like that.
Doesn't work.
This is not actually useful. It's not productive at all.
I think anyone who's listening to the podcast, Munib, will be able to say, like, it's awesome to hear you speak about this stuff, and the confidence that you have around the delivery and the understanding. And I was scrolling through there, I was trying to say, okay, well, how would you describe yourself in the current world, and where maybe we go back a little bit further, like, well, what did you study and stuff? Because it's this piece that a lot of change makers seem to struggle with, is the confidence piece to speak up, to champion the belief system and the frameworks to help move the dial. But when you're speaking, it's with vigor, and it's with confidence, and I love it. How did you foster that? Have you naturally been a great orator?
So, look, I think I'm a very curious person, and I was really I'm open-minded, and I have a growth mindset, and constantly thinking about new challenges, and then something new. So, and sometimes I'm ahead of my time, and sometimes I kind of sometimes people look at you and say, what this guy is dreaming. I will give you an anecdote, like, really short one. When I was doing my PhD, I was doing e-commerce. You and I discussed that earlier. And back in '97, we have 2 daughters, and at that time they were 10 and 8 or something like that, and even younger. And then I remember my wife got in a mailbox saying, like, a great offer for Encyclopedia Britannica. And you buy these, big books and things like that. And she was coming to me and she said, well, this is in a lifetime kind of opportunity to buy these Encyclopedia Britannica for our. I said, why do you need it? But for our kids, that they can start actually growing up with this kind of encyclopedia. And I was telling her, because I was doing e-commerce, and in '97, I was telling her, our kids will not actually read anything from Encyclopedia Britannica. And she was angry at me. She was like saying, how can you do that? We need to have that. And I said, they will never do it, because they will go through online environment. They will learn from that. And this is what happened. And then 5 or 6 years later, when they actually going through that, and they went through the process, she admitted, and she said, I really admit that you were right. But it was 5 or 6 years ago. And at that time, she didn't understand the positioning that I was trying to say. But the point I want to make is that I've been always in this kind of innovation world, and in thinking, how can we kind of make things stronger? But one thing I usually, when I design this entrepreneurship course, and then obviously people are kind of contributing the theory of entrepreneurship, and one of the principles that people introduce is, you need to be ready.
That all comes across when you're speaking. But what advice do you have to people who maybe don't feel that way and want to increase their chances of success?
Yeah. So, like, I think, this is what we practice with our designers. So, designers are great, creative people, but sometimes they had a hard time navigating through the organization. So in my, what we actually practice this, we work with leadership framing the problem. And very next stage is actually go through a stakeholder prioritization and a stakeholder engagement plan. And we spend a lot of time building that kind of tool. And when we walk, we spend some time with leaders in the organization, and then we do some prioritization, and we have some certain methods and tools how we do that. But the most important is that how you build an engagement plan. And then when designers work, and they are great in doing that, they have a fantastic, and then when they have that tool, when they have that kind of guidance, what to do, they are excellent. And if you tell them you need to do this and this, you need to engage these kind of group of stakeholders because they need to understand this, they will do it.
Yeah.
And this is very often we jump on kind of over that, and then we jump into immediately. Let's do the research, let's do the insights and things like that. But it's extremely important to have that, not to forget that step. And the second thing I also want to say, and this is again what we practice, that it is important that designers provide the context.
Yeah.
Whatever they do, not assume that people are familiar with it. So even if you say, let's do an ideation, it requires why we're doing that. What's the purpose of that? So, and what we want to achieve with this, how we actually detach people from the current environment, how we stimulate you. And then all of these things you need to say, because if you just go and say, let's do brainstorming, and I'll tell you, put in the 5 groups and we start actually, think about you are Elon Musk, and then start people, no, that doesn't work. And this is kind of what we need to make sure that we provide. And then people will start to appreciate it. And I can see that firsthand with our designers, when they provide the context and explaining to people how it works, people are very keen to cooperate.
Yeah. Munib, we're coming towards the end of the episode. I just want to ask one last question. What's your hope for the next 15, 20 years for Wave and for yourself? Okay, like in terms of human-centered design, we're about to, I think we're at the start of the crest of a wave that's going to probably envelop the industry in the next 6 to 12 months with AI and a lot more challenges. What's your hope? And what's your one wish that we can get better at as a practice?
So look, you see, our vision is Wave Design to be continue to be boutique design innovation company, which actually will work very closely in collaboration with the organizations. And we really believe in this the kind of notion that we need to help organizations to build internal capabilities.
Sure.
While we are delivering outcomes, it's kind of very important. While we're delivering outcomes, we build the capabilities by involving a lot of people working with us and things like that. That's number one. Number two, I want actually to have we do have that in our kind of strategy and vision. We want to have a very capable designers who are really people who will be recognized in industries, across industries in Australia. We don't have any kind of ambition to go broader than Australia, and we will be very happy to be here and deliver great outcomes for Australian companies.
Yeah.
So, I want to actually designers, and you probably, I'm not sure if you follow, you can see more and more designers from Wave Design posting some stories on LinkedIn. And we encourage our designers to write case studies. We actually put a lot of attention in writing case studies. It's not a commercial material or a marketing material, which is like we want actually to present what we really feel about it.
It's a great skill to have, to be able to surmise your perspective on the effort to create something and putting it in a portfolio.
And we are driven by outcomes and then an impact that we create. And what I want actually to see us also more involved in the kind of non-for-profits and helping especially people in the disabled communities. And we're already working with people in healthcare, community healthcare and things like that. There's a lot of interesting things with co-design and things like that. So we don't want to be a massive company. We just want to be a company with nice harmony internally, with the highly kind of skilled and knowledgeable people working together and having fun and delivering great outcomes and impact for our
Awesome.
clients.
Munib, listen, look, I wrap every episode up with thanking the guests for allowing me to put them on the spot and ask questions and go left and go right and go backwards and go forward. So I appreciate you giving me your time. I know it's dinner time in your household. You're probably hungry, but thanks for giving me your time and your vulnerability. I really, really appreciate it. If people want to reach out to you, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. Is there, and maybe the website as well for Wave.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to include in there? Just let me know. We'll throw a link into it.
It's all good, and they will. If they actually, they can find it easily. So in today's world, it's very easy to find people if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I also want to say, Gerry, the way how you approach this is excellent, and I think what I was talking earlier, it's how you actually kind of building awareness about design is exactly what you're doing, and probably entire design community in Australia and globally should encourage actually people to listen your program, because what you are doing now, I had to go to US or Europe and actually listen to these stories from people that they would tell me, and I learned from them when I was building things in my organization. And it's now much better that we have people from all around the world giving different stories. Just
absolutely,
and well done for that. I really
thank you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Munib, stay in touch.